Hi, I'm Sable Dorsett, the daughter they erased, the sister they silenced. My own brother slammed me so hard into the fridge I saw stars, then crushed my nose with his knee. Blood poured, the room spun, and when I reached for the phone, my own mother ripped it from my hand. "It's just a scratch," she snapped. And my dad didn't even look up. There goes the drama queen again. They thought I would stay quiet. They had no idea what was coming. Because silence can feel like death until one day it breaks. And when it does, it's louder than any fist. "Do you regret standing up to them?" someone whispered to me once. I answered no. I regret staying silent for so long. But here's the real question. Have you ever been dismissed, mocked or gaslit by the people meant to protect you? Drop a comment below. What city are you watching from right now? And if this story makes you feel something, hit subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Thank you for supporting this journey. Thanksgiving night always carried a strange heaviness in our family, thick with memories, buried resentments, and the soft clinking of forks, trying to mask everything left unsaid. This year, the turkey was dry, the wine overly sweet, and the silence sharp enough to cut through bone. I stood in the kitchen, scraping hardened stuffing into the trash while the dishwasher hummed steadily behind me. The fluorescent light overhead flickered, casting twitchy shadows over a sink full of dishes stacked high like the arguments we never dared to finish. I wasn't even trying to start anything. Honestly, I swear. I just said, "So Wyatt, I heard Mom and Dad signed the house over to you. That true? I didn't ask it with spite. Maybe there was a sliver of curiosity. Maybe I just wanted to understand why they'd never said a single word to me. Their oldest daughter, the one who stayed through Dad's first stroke, the one who drove Mom to every chemo appointment last spring. I only wanted to know why no one thought I deserved to hear it." Wyatt turned from the fridge, beer still cold in his hand, lips curling into that same smug little grin I'd known since childhood, the one that always came right before he said something meant to sting. "Why do you care? You never really lived here after high school. Thought you were too good for Marlowe, remember?" I kept my tone flat. "That's not true. I was working. You know that. I was always here when it counted." His eyes flashed. "Yeah, sure. Flying in from Asheville every now and then doesn't exactly count as being around Sable." I turned off the faucet, dried my hands on the towel nearby, looked straight at him. "I just think if we're talking about family property, maybe we all should have been included. That's all." And then, it happened. One moment I was standing beside the counter. The next my back slammed into the fridge with a sickening thud that rattled my ribs. My breath vanished. Before I could move, Wyatt's knee crashed into my face. A white-hot pain exploded through my skull, then just ringing, muffled, distant, unbearable. I collapsed onto the tile floor, vision spinning. Somewhere in the background, the football game still blared from the living room. No one had even bothered to lower the volume. I tasted blood. My mouth opened, gasping, but no sound came out at first. I reached out blindly, fingers finally curling around the cold edge of the counter. I pulled myself up slow, unsteady. My vision doubled, one eye already swelling shut. I staggered toward the wall phone near the back door. I don't remember deciding to call the police. My body simply moved on instinct, like some part of me wanted to survive even if no one else cared. My hand brushed the receiver. I grabbed it, tried to dial, but my fingers trembled so badly the buttons seemed to blur into one another. I hit 9, then 1. That's when I felt the tug. The phone was yanked from my hand so violently it shattered against the floor. "Stop it," my mother hissed. "It's just a scratch." I looked up at her through my good eye, the other one already closing shut. Her face was calm, almost annoyed, like I'd spilled something on the carpet. No horror, no worry, just irritation. "It's not a scratch," I whispered. She bent down and picked up the broken phone. "You always do this. Always make it a scene." Behind her, Dad sat slumped in the recliner, still clutching the remote. He didn't even glance over, just muttered, "There goes the drama queen again." I stood there, swaying gently, knees buckling under me. Blood kept dripping from my nose, splattering across my shirt in slow, steady drops. No one moved. Not my mother, not my father, not Wyatt. The room was so quiet, so unnervingly still, I could hear the announcer on the television say clearly second and goal. And that's when I saw it just there on the floor near the baseboard. My leather bracelet. The one I wore during every shift at the hospital, wrapped tight like armor. A patient had given it to me once. A woman I had sat with through her final night, whispering stories while she slipped away. It had snapped during the scuffle, ripped and fallen, and now lay in a dark smear of blood. No one noticed. No one cared. That bracelet had meant something to me. A reminder that I mattered. That I made a difference somewhere, even if never in this house. I crouched, reaching down with trembling fingers to pick it up. The leather was torn and frayed. Useless now. Like me, maybe. I looked up again. Still no one had moved. I swallowed hard. My throat burned. Then I walked one step, then another toward the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the icy night. The cold air slapped my face like a warning. For a second, I almost turned back, expecting anyone to follow. Maybe they'd ask if I was okay, maybe offer an apology, a ride to the emergency room, something, anything. But there was nothing, only the door creaking shut behind me like the closing of a chapter. I wiped the blood from my face, using the sleeve of my old jacket, and stood there, under the porch light, listening to the wind rustling through the empty street. "They really don't see me at all," I whispered, voice low. Then softer, but steadier, like steel slowly sharpening. "They don't see me, but they'll hear me soon." By the time I pulled into the hospital parking lot 2 mornings later, the bruising had turned a deep swollen plum. It spread like spilled ink beneath my eye, creeping across my cheek. I had done my best with concealer in the dim mirror of my apartment's cramped bathroom. But makeup only covered so much when your face insisted on telling the truth louder than your voice ever could. I kept my head down, walking in through the back entrance of the ER. Badge clipped to the front of my coat, eyes avoiding anyone already in the break room. I clocked in past the gently humming vending machines and shut myself into the tiny staff bathroom at the end of the hall. The mirror above the sink didn't lie. The swelling had gone down slightly, just enough to notice. But the bruising, still vivid around my eye and cheekbones, screamed louder than anything I could say. My lip had begun to heal, but there was still a thin split running across it, struggling to close. I pressed a damp, cold paper towel to my cheek, not because it soothed the pain, but because it gave my hands something to do. A soft knock made me flinch. Sable Callie's voice, tentative, careful. One of the new nurses, barely out of school, all bright eyes and eager heart. I opened the door slowly. She blinked at my face, then looked down at the coffee in her hand. "Sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to interrupt anything." She hesitated, then added even softer, "Are you safe?" "Really?" I didn't respond right away. She didn't ask what happened, and I appreciated that more than I could say. It wasn't curiosity. It was genuine concern. "Yeah," I lied, folding my arms tightly across my chest. "I just slipped on the back steps. There was black ice." Callie handed me the coffee. "Well, here. I thought maybe you'd be tired. You always take the early calls even on holidays and snow days." I forced a tired smile. "Thanks. That's really sweet of you." We walked into the break room together, where a few others were lounging half asleep before their shifts began. Silas, one of the trauma nurses, raised an eyebrow but didn't speak. He just nodded at me, that silent check-in men sometimes offer when they don't know how to ask the real questions. The warmth from these people I shared no blood with, caught me off guard, in the gentlest, most disarming way. They were the ones who brought me burritos during brutal overnight shifts, who remembered my birthday with sticky notes and tiny cupcakes, who knew exactly how I liked my coffee down to the cream-to-sugar ratio. They didn't ask too much. They didn't pry. But they saw me. Really saw me more than my own family ever had. On my first 10-minute break, I sank onto the bench near the lockers and finally opened my phone. 2 days since Thanksgiving. No missed calls. no voicemails, not even a simple, "How are you?" text. I wasn't surprised. I scrolled lower. Just one message from Rachel Sable, "Don't stir up drama. You know how Wyatt gets. Just let it go." I stared at the screen. Just let it go. Those 5 words pressed harder into my chest than Wyatt's knee ever could. I didn't know what I had expected from her. Maybe nothing. Or maybe just not this. Not a reminder that even my own sister, the one who used to braid my hair before recitals, still saw me as the problem. Not the bruises. Not the broken skin. Just me. I leaned back and stared at the speckled ceiling tiles blinking against the sting in my eyes. Then, like muscle memory rising from deep water, an old scene came back. I was 9. Wyatt was 13. We were at our grandparents' old farmhouse on the edge of Marlow. I had taken the last Pop-Tart. He locked me in the shed out back, laughing while I pounded and screamed on the door. It was sweltering. I cried. I kicked. I begged. No one came. When they finally found me hours later, dirty, dehydrated, covered in mosquito bites, Mom laughed and said I'd been too dramatic. Dad told me I was overly sensitive. And I hadn't said anything that night, just like I wouldn't say anything now. Back in the ER, I slipped quietly into the supply closet, not because I needed anything from the shelves, but because I needed air. I sat down on an overturned crate, pulled my notebook from my bag, and flipped to a blank page. I started to write. November 28th, 2024. Right orbital bruise. 6.5 centimeter minor laceration to lower lip. Upper back soreness. Likely contusion from impact. Incident assault by male sibling during family gathering. I paused. My hand was shaking again, but not from pain this time. From something colder. Something deeper. Then I kept going. History age 7 shoved off swing set. Age 9 locked in shed. Age 13 tripped downstairs, no apology. Age 17 called emotional and hysterical during argument over college applications. Age 25 excluded from all family financial discussions. Age 28 mother told me to stay quiet because Wyatt was stressed after yelling at me. Current bruised face gaslit again. I flipped to the next page and kept writing. The list stretched on, and for the first time I saw it clearly, not as scattered moments or unlucky days, but as a pattern, a long, well-established pattern. If I had been charting this for a patient at the hospital, someone would have flagged it, intervened, escalated, but because it came from family, it had never counted. The fluorescent light above me buzzed softly. Somewhere beyond the door, someone called out a code blue. I stood up, slid the notebook into my bag, and walked back into the world that at the very least still needed me. After my shift ended, I sat quietly in my car for a few minutes before turning the key. The sky above was the color of steel wool, low gray, heavy with unshed snow. I reached into my purse and pulled out the bracelet, still crusted with dried blood. I wrapped it slowly, carefully in gauze from my nursing kit. My hands were steady now. I looked down at it, small and worn in the center of my palm, and whispered softly, to no one but myself. Not to anyone, but me. This ends right here. I won't let this pain pass on to the next generation, not even a trace of it. I didn't say a word when I parked in front of my parents' house. The gravel crunched under the tires with that familiar brittle sound, almost like a warning. But I told myself I was just there to drop off groceries. That was it. That's what Mom had asked for: eggs, milk, and that one specific oat milk creamer she insists on for her afternoon tea. Nothing more, nothing less. I rang the doorbell out of sheer habit, even though I still had my old key. No one answered. I let myself in. The house smelled the same lemon-scented cleaner and a kind of potpourri that tried far too hard to mimic roses. But the air felt colder now, somehow heavier, like it carried the weight of everything unsaid. I took off my shoes at the door like I always did and stepped into the kitchen where filtered light pushed gently through the lace curtains. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table reading the newspaper like I didn't exist, like I was air. "Hey, Dad." I said quietly, hesitantly. He didn't look up. From the hallway I heard footsteps. Wyatt. He walked right past me, shoulders square, brushing against mine with no acknowledgement. Just the sharp trail of his cologne and the echo of boots striking tile. His eyes skimmed my face. The bruises had faded now, faint yellowing shadows, but not even a blink. No flicker, no pause. Mom finally appeared, wiping her hands on a dish towel that looked too clean to have done any real work. "There she is," she chirped brightly, like I'd just wandered in from pruning roses in the garden. "Put the milk in the fridge." "Would you, sweetheart?" I nodded, opening the grocery bag. She walked over, gave my face a quick glance. "You're lucky Wyatt still puts up with you," she said with a smile, so effortlessly casual, I honestly wasn't sure if she even realized what she'd said out loud. I didn't respond, just set the milk down with a little more force than necessary. Then I told her I needed to find something in the attic. Some old baby blanket I thought I remembered from when I was sick once a long time ago. She waved me off, already far more interested in chopping carrots than asking why I was suddenly seeking comfort from something buried in the past. The attic was hotter than I remembered. The pull-down ladder groaned under my weight, and I climbed slowly, careful not to bump my right shoulder. It was still tender. Dust floated in the heavy air like faded memories you'd rather forget. Boxes were stacked everywhere. Holiday decorations, old yearbooks, bags of clothes that had never made it to Goodwill. I spotted a faded trunk in the far corner, wedged between an artificial Christmas tree and a box labeled Thanksgiving China. On its lid, in messy, childlike handwriting, probably mine, were the words, "Family, 1989, 2001. I pulled it forward. The wood groaned slightly. The lock was already broken. Inside were albums, thick, plastic-covered ones. Some pages had warped from heat. I flipped open the top album, hands already trembling a little. The first few pages showed Mom pregnant with Wyatt, her smile wide and glowing. Then came Wyatt's first steps. His Halloween costumes year after year. His graduation. His high school football trophies, all laid out like a perfectly curated museum exhibit of a beloved son. Where was I? I scanned every page, every corner, searching for my face, my smile, any proof that I had ever lived inside these same walls. There were a few group shots, Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, but I wasn't in them. Not even once. My stomach twisted tight. Then I found something. An album half burned at the edges, its cover warped from heat or maybe water damage. I opened it carefully, fingertips brushing the pages. Photos had been torn out sloppily, angrily. You could still see jagged bits of paper clinging to the corners like ghosts. But one page remained. A single half photo. Just the edge of a birthday cake, pink frosting curling at the border. And in the corner, scrawled in purple marker, was a child's handwriting. Sable's Day, with a tiny, uneven heart beside it. I stared at it. My breath caught in my chest. I remembered that cake. Strawberry with cream cheese frosting. I had begged for it for weeks, and then the memory returned clearer than I wanted it to. Wyatt had wanted the pink ribbon from my dress that day. I had refused clutching it tight. I'd hidden it in the laundry basket in the hallway, thinking I was clever. He found it, ripped it straight from the fabric. Then he shoved me hard into the linen closet and slammed the door. It locked from the outside. I was 8 years old. At first I screamed, loud and desperate. Then I kicked the door, yelled for help. Then I cried. Then whispered. Then whimpered. Eventually the heat made me dizzy. I remember curling up on a pile of towels, cheek pressed against the cool tile floor, the fabric scratching my arms. I don't remember falling asleep, but I do remember the sound of heels on the wood floor. Mom. I saw her shadow pause under the crack of the door. She stopped, and then she walked away. No one came until morning. I don't even remember who opened the door, just the light hitting my eyes and the sticky, sour smell of sweat and fear clinging to my dress. Back in the attic I felt that same tightness rising in my throat, that old familiar closeness. But this time I didn't cry. I closed the torn album slowly, gently, and carried it downstairs, tucked under my arm. I didn't say goodbye. By the time I got back to my apartment, dusk had fallen. The sky outside my window glowed with the soft pink hue of early evening, gentle and quiet. But inside, everything felt hollow, like a house that had already been emptied of meaning. I laid the album carefully on the coffee table, then walked to my closet. From the top shelf, I pulled down a plain shoebox. Inside were scraps, fragments of a life, photos, medical visit, summaries, a bracelet stained with dried blood, a folded note Wyatt had once slipped under my bedroom door. "You're not worth the air you breathe." I didn't throw any of it away. Tonight I began taping the pieces to the wall one by one. A bruise here, a faded photo there, a scribbled memory on a torn scrap. I stepped back, arms folded tightly across my chest. The half photo from my 8th birthday now sat at the center, pinned beneath a strip of masking tape. The marker squeaked softly as I wrote the title, "The Case Against Silence." I stepped back again, studying the wall, memories, pictures, scars, all arranged like some fractured puzzle finally making a shape. My hand hovered over one of the oldest photographs. Then it dropped to my side. I wasn't ready to look at that one again. That's when the phone rang. It was her. "Sweetheart," my mother's voice said, soft and almost rehearsed, like she'd practiced it. "How about dinner tomorrow night? Wyatt and Elena will be there. I thought maybe we could move on." Move on. My fingers tightened around the phone. My face still throbbed with the dull ache of a healing bruise. My thighs were still sore from crouching too long in the attic. My heart blistered. Still somewhere in me, maybe in the part that refused to give up, I wanted to believe. "I'll come," I said simply. The next afternoon I stopped by the florist and picked up a bouquet of pale yellow tulips. I didn't know why. Maybe habit, maybe hope wearing a disguise. When I arrived at the house, the porch light was already on, even though the sun hadn't set yet. Inside, the scent of roasted meat floated through the air, tangled with something sharp. Lemon again. Mom was in the kitchen, smoothing the front of her blouse and garnishing something with parsley. Her lipstick was too dark a shade that made her look like she was playing hostess at a country club luncheon. She turned when she saw me. "You look better," she said, almost cheerfully. "Glad the swelling's finally gone." Before I could respond, she was already turning back to the oven. I followed her into the hallway, the light dimmer there. I held out the tulips like a small peace offering. "Mom," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I was in the attic the other day." She paused, spoon in hand. There was an old photo album, the one labeled 1989 to 2001. My pictures were gone. Her shoulders tensed. She didn't turn. Did Wyatt do that? Or... She set the spoon down. "You always made everything so heavy," she said, finally, still not looking at me. "Crying at birthdays, sulking at Christmas. I told your father this one's got a flair for theatrics." I stared at her, voice thick. "You tore them out." She didn't answer, just smoothed her lipstick in the mirror beside the pantry. "You were always too dramatic, Sable. Not everything is an attack. You ruined more holidays with your crying than I care to count." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "I need to finish the rolls," she said, brushing past me. No apology, no guilt. Just years of silence packed into one smile that didn't reach her eyes. By the time dinner started, the table looked like a magazine spread, silverware aligned perfectly. Crystal glasses gleaming under the light. Elena Wyatt's fiancé was already seated with her parents, whispering something about vineyard tours in Soma. Wyatt gave me a curt nod when I walked in. My place card sat at the far end near the swinging kitchen door, farthest from the candles, the light, the laughter. I sat down slowly. Elena's father laughed loudly about something I hadn't caught. Elena leaned toward me. "Wyatt told us how you once locked yourself in a closet over a ribbon. So dramatic. Have you ever kept quiet for the sake of peace, even when it hurt you deeply? Share in the comments. Or just drop a 1 if that silence ever felt louder than the truth." Laughter rippled around the table. Mom chuckled. She used to do that sort of thing all the time. So sensitive. Wyatt added. One time she got a bruise from bumping into a doorknob and made Dad cancel his poker night like it was life or death. The words slid through the room like daggers dipped in sugar. I kept my hands beneath the table, fingers curled tightly into my palms until my nails bit into skin. This is the last time, I thought to myself. This is the very last time I sit here pretending this is normal. Then it happened. Wyatt reached across the table, laughing too loudly, trying to grab the bowl of mashed potatoes. His elbow clipped the teapot, the one full of freshly boiled water. I saw it tipping. Slow. Inevitable. The scalding water poured straight into my lap. The scream ripped from me before I could even think to hold it in. The pain was sharp. Immediate. I pushed back from the table chair legs, shrieking against the floor. Everyone froze. Then Mom sighed. Well, that was your fault for sitting too close. No one moved. Wyatt gave me a crooked half smile. Guess you should have picked the other seat, huh? I stumbled toward the sink, hands trembling. I opened the freezer. Just an old bag of peas and half-frozen ice trays. I grabbed a dish towel, soaked it with cold water, and pressed it to my thighs. The cotton hissed faintly against my skin. No one followed. I stayed there a few minutes, breathing through clenched teeth, biting the inside of my cheek, letting the pain settle into something duller, something colder. When I came back, the table conversation had resumed, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't screamed, as if I hadn't been burned. I stood behind my chair for a second, then left, without saying anything. Back at my apartment, I changed into soft cotton pants and sat quietly at the edge of the bed. The pain pulsed. But it wasn't just physical anymore. It was the knowing, the confirmation. I opened my notebook and drew 2 columns. People who were silent. People who helped hurt. I listed names carefully. Then I paused. There was one I hadn't thought of in years, not since I was 15. Someone who saw something once. Didn't mock. Didn't intervene. But didn't laugh either. I circled the name. My hand hovered, then tapped the contact. The screen rang twice. A voice answered. "Hello, hi," I said softly. "I need to talk to you. I'm ready now." I didn't sleep. My body stayed still, but my mind kept playing everything back again and again. The boiling water. The way Wyatt smiled as it hit me. The sting wasn't just skin deep. It stayed in my chest. I pulled the comforter tighter and stared at the ceiling while dawn crept through the blinds. The list sat waiting on my nightstand. I had scribbled names in the dark. Each one reopened something I thought I'd buried. I picked it up, fingers resting on one name I hadn't seen in so long. Then it triggered something. A smell. Bleach. Damp concrete. And suddenly I was 12 years old in the locker room trying to hide the bruises on my thighs by pulling my gym shorts down low. I remembered pressing a wet paper towel to the inside of my arm, wincing as it touched skin already too raw. I didn't tell anyone. Back then I truly believed I wasn't allowed to feel pain, that it would only prove I was dramatic like Mom always said with that sharp little laugh. I sat up in bed, legs aching slightly from yesterday's scald. My thighs were still red tender to the lightest touch, but what throbbed even more was the old ache I'd tried to bury for so long. I used to think I was the crazy one, for feeling left out, for crying when my picture was cut from the album, for believing that silence could be a weapon too. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A calendar alert. Nothing urgent, just a reminder to check the mailbox before noon. An old habit from my freelance days back when missing deadlines had consequences. I slipped into a loose pair of jeans, one of the few that didn't rub harshly against my lap, and made my way down the stairs, the list still clutched in one hand. I opened the mailbox at the curb, expecting mostly bills. But there it was, one plain cream-colored envelope, no return address on the front. The postmark came from somewhere upstate, a town I hadn't thought about since high school. I flipped it over, frowning slightly when I saw my name written in neat cursive. Not Sable Dorsett, just Sable. Inside, folded neatly, were 2 lined pages. My breath caught at the very first line. "Dear Sable, I don't know if you remember me. I was your music teacher in 8th grade, Miss Ada. I stood frozen at the mailbox. My thumb brushed the paper, almost afraid to keep going. But I read. I've thought about you for years. I saw the bruises. I tried to say something. I even filed a concern with the school counselor. But your parents came in. They threatened to sue. I was young and scared. And I let it go. I shouldn't have. I walked back into the house slowly, carefully, as if I were carrying something sacred. At the kitchen table, I spread the pages out gently in front of me like a fragile lifeline. She had seen. Someone had seen me back then. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't making it up. I wasn't dramatic. The letter continued. I still have my journal from that year. I wrote everything. I even saved the complaint form. If you ever want to talk or need someone to confirm what you lived through, I'm here. I'm so sorry I didn't fight harder back then. My hand rose slowly and covered my mouth. I stayed that way for a long while, just breathing. By late afternoon, I picked up my phone and found the number she'd written at the bottom of the page. It rang twice. Hello? Hi, Miss Ada, I said, voice low and a little uncertain. There was a pause. Then Sable. Oh my. I didn't think you'd call so soon. I could hear the emotion in her voice, warm and cracked. That made two of us. I told her I got the letter. That I remembered the purple cardigan she used to wear all the time. The way she'd close her eyes when the violin students hit sour notes. She chuckled softly, then said quietly, I'm so incredibly glad you're okay. I didn't say I wasn't okay. Not yet. But I told her about the list, about the photos, about the dinner. When I got to the water, she stayed silent for a few seconds. Then she finally spoke. People like your mother, she said softly. They count on silence. Yours and everyone else's too. We talked for almost a full hour. At the end, she reminded me again she still had her journal, the complaint form, everything. If you ever need me to back you up, I'm ready. Truly ready this time. I should have done it a long time ago. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not just believed, witnessed. That night the world outside was quiet. The house was quiet. But my thoughts weren't. I had just finished organizing a folder on my laptop. Its name, Documentation Phase 1. That's when the knock came. Sharp. Impatient. I opened the door, expecting a delivery. Instead, there he stood. My father. Frank. No warning. No smile. Just that tight jaw, pressed lips. The exact expression I'd seen my whole childhood. I heard you've been talking, he said, stepping 1 foot inside like he owned the very air in my living room, digging up old things that should have stayed buried where they belong. I didn't respond. I looked at him. Really looked. And I didn't see a father anymore. I saw a man desperate to preserve control. You're making this family look bad, he hissed, low and furious. You're going to destroy whatever little reputation we still have left. If that's really what you want, go ahead. But don't think there won't be consequences for any of this. He turned to leave. But then, as if on cue, he looked back one more time. You were always a burden. Still are. No matter what lawyer you think will save you now. Then he slammed the door. I stood there, chest rising and falling, not from fear, from release. It was like hearing those words out loud had shattered something inside me that had been suffocating for years. I sat back at the table, wiped my cheeks, and whispered, They never loved me. They just loved the power they had over me. I reached for my laptop, clicked open the folder. Sat still for a moment, the screen's soft glow resting gently on my face. Outside, the sun had begun to lower, casting long golden shadows across the blinds. I didn't move right away. My hands hovered over the keyboard, as if completing that one task might unleash something inside me I wasn't fully ready to face. So I got up, walked slowly to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water. My throat was dry, but I barely drank any of it. I stared at the countertop, lost in the weight of my father's words from the night before. You're still our burden. He hadn't said daughter. He hadn't said family. Just burden. Back in the living room, I reached for my old backup drive, the dusty silver one I hadn't touched since before smartphones ran our lives. It had been sitting there like a forgotten relic on the edge of the bookshelf. I had meant to wipe it, free up space. But now curiosity moved my hand. I plugged it in, expecting nothing at all. At first, just the usual mess: graduation photos, receipts, a few blurry selfies with college roommates I no longer spoke to. I almost shut the window down, but then I noticed it. A folder tucked between mislabeled files, KBKP204. I had no memory of creating it. I clicked it open, and there they were. Photos I hadn't remembered taking. Photos I must have buried both literally and emotionally. My face swollen, a bruise curling across my collarbone, yellowing at the edges. My arm splotched with angry violet, and my eyes dull, resigned, like I had already made peace with being hurt. Each image was dated, unedited, proof I hadn't imagined at all. I stared at the screen, frozen. My chest tightened, but it wasn't fear. It wasn't even shame anymore. It was clarity. I had recorded the truth, and somewhere along the way, I let myself believe it wasn't real. That I had exaggerated, that I was being dramatic, the word they always chose. I wasn't imagining it. I whispered to the room, quiet and still around me. I documented it, and I forgot. For the next hour, I moved every file into an encrypted folder. Then I opened my cloud drive, created a new directory, and named it Project Witness. It felt like something final, not revenge, just a line. A way to say this happened to me, and it was never okay. I was still staring at the upload bar when my phone lit up. The name stopped my breath. Rachel Varnell. We hadn't spoken in years, not since we were 12, both wearing braces, playing hopscotch under the summer sun. She was calling from Michigan now, married with kids. I answered. "Hey, Rachel. Sable. Hi." Her voice was hesitant, uncertain. "This might sound weird," she said, "but do you have a minute?" I walked to the window, leaned lightly against the frame. "Sure. What's going on?" She let out a breath. "Do you know my niece Lily?" I frowned. "Not really. Why?" "She's staying with your folks right now. My sister was deployed. Your mom said she missed having a little one around." I stiffened. "How long has she been there?" "About 3 weeks," Rachel said. "But..." Sable Lily said something odd this morning. I stood straighter. "What did she say?" "She told me your brother pushed her." I froze. She said he told her not to be a drama queen, like Sable said she was pretending. My throat tightened. She was crying. Her wrist looked swollen. "I thought I should call you, because I remembered things too." I sank into the nearest chair. My legs couldn't support the weight in my chest. "She's 8, Rachel said softly. "Same age we were. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe he was joking. But Lily doesn't lie. She's not that kind of kid," Rachel said. Silence stretched between us, thick and unspoken. "She said my brother pushed her. Yes. And they used my name. To shame her, yes." A slow, deep heat spread through my chest. Not the panicked, breathless kind I used to feel when Dad raised his voice. No, this was different. It was sharp, focused, steady. "I'm sorry if this brings up anything painful," Rachel added quickly, "but I honestly didn't know who else I could turn to." "No," I said. "You did the right thing. Absolutely the right thing." After we hung up, I stayed at the desk for a long time, unmoving the photo folder still glowing behind another tab on my screen. It was happening again. Same patterns, same language, different child, same house, same hands. And just like that, the old internal debate resurfaced, one I thought I had buried beneath therapy and silence. Do I speak up? Do I risk being dragged back into their threats, their denial, their ugly games? Or do I stay quiet again? Let another little girl learn silence, the way I once did. I stared at the screen and whispered more to myself than anyone else. Do I become the woman I once needed someone else to be for me? The house looked almost the same as before, maybe a little dimmer, the paint a little more cracked around the corners. but it still carried that same stale air of denial, the weight of unsaid things. I stood at the front door with a homemade peach pie in my hands, still warm from the oven wrapped in a clean dish towel, Mom's favorite. I had baked it with steady hands, not out of kindness, but to appear calm, predictable, like the version of their daughter they preferred. I rang the bell once and waited. I didn't want to walk in uninvited. Not today. Not when I was carrying something sharper than pie beneath my sleeve. Dad opened the door. "Well, look who finally stopped sulking," he said. His voice held that familiar edge of condescension, like a smirk hiding under every word. I smiled. "Not wide, just enough. Thought I'd check in on Lily," I said, voice measured. He stepped aside and I walked in. The house smelled like rosemary and garlic. Something was roasting in the oven. Mom was setting the table 4 places like nothing had changed, like they were still a picture-perfect family. She looked up and froze for a split second when she saw me. Then her eyes dropped to the pie. "Peach?" she asked. "Fresh from my kitchen," I said. She gave one small nod as if awarding me a single invisible point in a game I never agreed to play. "Set it by the window. Dinner's almost ready." I did as she said, sliding back into the version of me they recognized, quiet, polite, unthreatening. We sat around the table like actors hitting their marks. Same chairs, same centerpiece, even the same flickering candle they always used for nice dinners. But my skin itched remembering where the bruises used to form, just under the corner of that table, where I once hit my shoulder, trying to dodge a blow. Small talk floated through the air. Dad asked about traffic. Mom offered me potatoes. I nodded. I smiled. I played the part. Then I set my fork down, the sound soft but deliberate. I found something, I said softly, eyes on my plate. "On an old drive," I said. "Photos. All time-stamped. Clear." Frank's hand froze halfway to his mouth. Lois's fork clinked against her plate. I looked up at both of them and spoke calmly. "You have 72 hours, I said, voice even, to tell the truth publicly. Or I will." No raised voice. No emotion they could call hysteria. Just facts. Cold, controlled, practiced. Frank narrowed his eyes. "You think threatening us like this will get you what you want?" "I don't want anything," I replied. "I only want accountability. You really think people are going to believe you over your own family?" I leaned slightly forward. "I don't need belief. I have documentation. And a timeline. And Lily." The mention of her name landed hard like stone on glass. Lois shifted uncomfortably. Frank's face went rigid. "You can bury me again," I said, keeping my gaze on both of them. "Or you can start digging your own graves. It's your choice." Silence. Then came soft footsteps approaching the dining room. Lily. She stood in the doorway holding a crayon and a half-colored page, her eyes wide and still. Before I could say a single word, Lois snapped. "What did I tell you about eavesdropping?" Her voice was shrill, pitched high with panic. "You want to end up broken like her? Keep snooping around like that and see what happens." Lily froze. Every inch of her small body tensed. Her bottom lip trembled. She stepped back slowly like she had just touched something burning. I stood, napkin still in my lap. I looked directly at Lois. "You just confirmed everything I needed to hear." Her mouth opened, then shut again. I didn't storm out. That's what they'd expect. I didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't throw anything. Instead, I walked into the kitchen. The air in there was warmer, filled with the scent of rosemary and pie. I moved to the cabinet near the fridge and opened the upper door. There it was. My old teacup. White porcelain with blue vines curling down the side, the one I used every single night before bed when I still lived here, back when things felt almost safe. I reached to the back, took it down carefully, and placed it inside my purse. Zipped it shut. In the hallway, I glanced once toward Lily's room. The door was barely open, just enough for me to see the shadows. "They still think I'm bluffing," I whispered to myself. I slipped out of the house, as quietly as I had entered, the teacup nestled in my bag, like a memory finally reclaimed. I didn't bother with goodbyes. Let them think I was bluffing. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the edge of my bed, laptop, open eyes locked on one audio file I had saved months ago. It was Lily's voice, small, scared, breaking. "Mommy, please, I didn't mean to drop it. Please don't shut me out there again." Then came Lois's voice. Cold, precise. "Well, maybe if you listened the first time you wouldn't be punished. Now go." I closed the file. I didn't cry, not anymore. 2 days later, I walked into the community school board meeting. It was held at the town hall auditorium, about half full. The kind of gathering where people wore stiff smiles and sipped from tiny plastic water bottles. My parents sat near the front, hands folded, expressions curated. They were waiting to receive a Community Legacy Award for decades of dedicated service to youth programs. I found a seat near the back of the room and waited. The board chair began with the usual compliments, thanking my parents for their donations, their tireless leadership in parent-teacher councils, their legacy of raising strong, resilient children. When she finally paused and asked, "Would anyone like to say a few words?" I stood. "Just one thing," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried. It filled every corner of that auditorium. "Before you hand out honors tonight, there's something you should hear." Heads turned. Lois's head whipped around, panic rising in her expression. Frank leaned back, arms folding across his chest slowly as if preparing for a performance. I walked steadily toward the small podium, pulled a flash drive from my pocket, plugged it into the laptop. No introduction, no explanation. I just pressed play. The recording filled the room. Lily's voice raw and pleading, then Lois's voice cold, dismissive, razor sharp. A silence followed that felt like gravity had deepened. Gasps. Someone near the front let out a broken, "Oh my God." A teacher in the third row covered her mouth. Lois had turned grey. Frank sat frozen, jaw clenched like he could break his own teeth. "I'm Sable," I said once the audio ended. Their daughter, Lily's sister, the one who was also told to go outside when she cried. I paused. I waited years, too many years. Then came a voice from the left side of the room. "I reported a bruise on Lily's arm last spring," said Mrs. Holston, her music teacher rising slowly from her chair. No one followed up. I asked the principal. I never got a response. Then another voice. "We were their neighbors," said a man behind me. "Every Saturday we heard screaming. We just thought someone else would say something." The room had shifted. It was no longer polite, no longer controlled. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "I'm done waiting." Lois looked like she might faint. Frank's mouth twitched somewhere between rage and panic. Then he stood, suddenly pulling a folded paper from his blazer pocket and marching toward the front. "She's unstable," he said, voice shaking in that tightly restrained way he always used to sound authoritative. "She was hospitalized for mental illness 3 years ago. Here's the documentation. You deserve to know what kind of person is making these accusations." He held the paper in the air like a shield, like it could protect him. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I didn't need to. From the back row, a voice cut clean through the tension. "That's not accurate." Every head turned. "I'm Dr. Eleanor Sims," she said, standing slowly, her voice calm but with weight. "I'm the physician listed on that file, and that document has been altered severely." She stepped forward. Sable was seen for physical injury, not psychological. She was never admitted for mental health evaluation. This file is a forgery. No one breathed. Frank's hand dropped slowly to his side. His face cracked. His bluff had been called publicly, definitively. I took one step toward the podium again. "You forged my records," I said. "Just like you erased every mark you left behind. Just like you convinced everyone else that I was the difficult one." I reached into my bag and pulled out the teacup, walked slowly to the front of the room and placed it gently on the wooden podium. "I used to drink chamomile from this," I said while pressing ice to my face. "You told me it was my fault the cup cracked, that I dropped it in a tantrum. But I kept it, because I knew that one day I'd pour the truth back into it." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Security had arrived by then. Murmurs had shifted into motion. "We're going to need you both to come with us. one officer said, stepping toward my parents. They didn't resist. They didn't speak. They simply stood there, stunned as the room parted for them. No longer heroes, but people whose shadows had finally caught up. And as they reached the back of the auditorium, I caught a flicker of movement by the hallway door. Lily. She stood near the frame, clutching her backpack, eyes wide but dry. She didn't blink. She didn't cry. She just watched, just like I once did. She didn't move, just stood there, barely taller than the doorknob, her gaze locked onto mine. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. There wasn't anything to say. She had heard everything, and I knew that look. I had worn it once, too. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I made tea. Not chamomile, just plain black. Hot. Strong. I sat at my little kitchen table while the city softened into quiet, and I stared out the window like the answers might be hiding in the dark. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Still. Like my hands had finally stopped shaking after years of pretending they didn't. 1 week later, I sat in my attorney's office across from Jeanette, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a steel-grey bob and a filing system that could probably take down a cartel. She slid a folder across the table. "Child Protective Services filed formal charges against your parents this morning," she said evenly. "Child endangerment, falsifying medical records, interference with mandated reporting." I nodded slowly. "And Lily. She's been placed in temporary foster care for now," Jeanette said gently. "But we've initiated your guardianship petition. Given the public nature of your testimony and the strength of the documentation you provided, I don't foresee any pushback." I exhaled through my nose and looked down at my hands resting on the table. "Can you add a clause?" I asked quietly. Jeanette tilted her head. "Go on. I want it on record," I said. "They're not to contact me or Lily. Ever. No letters, no surprise. Just want to talk calls. Nothing." She nodded, already scribbling. "I'll make sure it's airtight," she said. When I left her office, the sun was hanging low, warm and amber, painting long shadows across the sidewalk. I passed the corner cafe where my mother once told me, "No one's going to believe your little stories, Sable. You always make things sound worse than they really are." Funny. The world finally listened the moment I stopped trying to make it sound better. That afternoon, I found myself standing in front of a reporter outside Lily's school. I had not agreed to any formal interviews, but she was young and earnest, holding her microphone like it was some kind of moral compass. She was still learning how to follow. "Ms. Dorsett," she asked softly, voice low. "Why didn't you speak up sooner than this?" I looked directly into the camera lens, then let my eyes drift to the empty swing set behind her. "Because no one ever really asked how I was doing," I said. "They just called me dramatic like always." She lowered the microphone slowly, her eyes wet and glistening. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. It was never about fame. I did not want to feature in the Sunday paper. But sometimes you speak not for yourself, but because another little girl might be listening. And maybe she will believe her own voice, even if no one else ever does. 2 days later, I drove to the group shelter where Lily had been placed temporarily. The building was not much peeling paint-cracked sidewalk, but it was clean, and the staff were kind, even gentle. Lily was sitting on a mat near the corner of the playroom, cradling a worn-out stuffed dog that looked like it had survived 5 generations. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes wide and unsure. I crouched down, hands on my knees. "Hey, sweet pea," I said softly. She blinked once. "Do I have to go back to them?" I felt something twist tightly in my chest. I leaned in a little closer. "No, baby," I whispered. "Not ever again." She did not cry. She just leaned forward, pressed her forehead gently to mine, and held it there. I let her stay that way for as long as she needed. When she finally sat back, I reached into my bag. "I brought something special for you," I said. She watched carefully as I pulled out a small box and opened the lid. Inside was a white porcelain teacup, decorated with tiny blue forget-me-nots. "It's not cracked," I told her. You can drink your cocoa from it anytime you want. You don't need permission from anyone." She reached for it, slowly cradling it, like it might dissolve right there between her small fingers. "It's really pretty," she whispered, eyes searching mine. "Can it stay with me?" I nodded, smiling softly. "Of course. It's yours now. You keep it as long as you want, sweetheart." That night, back in my apartment on the edge of Marlow, I pulled out my old chipped teacup, the one with the faint hairline crack, running along the rim like a scar only I could recognize, and placed it gently on the shelf beside the one I had given Lily. I'd bought them together. I'd always meant to. Then I lit a single candle and sat at my desk. The room was quiet, but no longer heavy. I opened the new journal I'd picked up earlier that week from a tiny bookstore tucked behind the courthouse downtown. I remembered asking the woman behind the counter to emboss the title in gold. It shimmered faintly beneath the flame, things I was told never to say. I pressed the pen to the first page. They never hit me hard enough to kill me, just hard enough to make me question myself, hard enough to keep me quiet. The ink flowed freely, but silence is no longer my legacy. I paused and let that truth settle. This is how I protect a child the way I once needed someone to protect me. And just that, is enough. I closed the journal, still warm from my hands, then sat back and stared at the two cups, one cracked, one whole, and somehow both finally safe, because sometimes the deepest scars are the ones no one sees, the ones no one believes, and yet they're real. If you've ever been silenced, minimized, or made to doubt your own pain by the people who should have protected you, I hope you know this. You're not imagining things, you're not alone, and you're not broken. I hope you'll share your story in the comments. I truly read every word, and I believe you. And if this story stayed with you, I'd love for you to stay with me. Like this video, share it with someone who might need it today, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories that speak into the silence. And before you go, leave a few words below, something for yourself, something for others. Just type, "I choose freedom." Thank you for being here. Truly, I'll see you in the next one.